You're coming back to the normal boring ass golf. Welcome on in. If you've learned nothing else from today's PGA Tour, DP World Tour, and Live merger, is that if you're an employee of a company, they don't give a shit about you.
The PGA Tour often refers to itself as a player-run organization. That it operates differently than traditional professional sports leagues. Well, in this instance, a player-run organization. The players had no idea that this was happening, and the reactions were everything from confusion to anger. Um, and it's been reacting in real time basically since 10 a.m. this morning.
I wanted to come with a balanced perspective. Whether I'm your first, 10th, or 100th video that you've watched on this particular subject, it's easy to get angry from either perspective that you come from. Maybe you're gloating in the win if you're somebody who supported Live all along and said that this was the ultimate result. That's fine. That's cool. If today is the day that you can say, I told you so, pat yourself on the back, don't hurt your shoulder doing so. But what I would like to talk about is the winners, losers, and the TBD that we can somewhat have definitive definitions on. So let's talk about the losers first, because I think that's important, is to see who's on the short side of the stick today. PGA Tour players that stayed around for this result and were caught by surprise. That's the number one loser for me. And that's a tough 1 and 1A with the next one that I'm going to come with. These players stuck around and were loyal to the tour. They saw their Live compadres go get that money. And then seemingly today is they're going to be allowed a path back to the PGA Tour with minimal pain. At the end of the day, they've been playing in the majors, due to some, past exemptions, sliding down the world rankings, but they've been able to play. So there's some minimal impact on the Live side, but it seems like they will have a path back to the PGA Tour, regular tour stops with this kind of merged, cooperative situation that still seems kind of murky.
All those commercial assets, drop them down into that for-profit LLC. This is early. We're going to go through an evaluation of all of the businesses, and the PIF will invest in NewCo. And importantly, as Yasser is quick to point out, there'll be an additional investment and growth initiative.
Here these guys are probably feeling like they have egg on their face while being loyal to a guy like Jay Monahan, who always looked like a stiff board up there and disingenuous. That prick, we'll talk about him a little bit later, but I feel bad for the PGA Tour guys who stuck around. Rory, who invested his heart and soul into this discussion over the last year, only to be told, hey man, there you go. That's what you get for sticking up for the tour. I don't know what happens on the back end, if there's some just dessert for people who are loyal in the face of this, but here we are. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, some power brokers with a lot of money have made a decision on the behalf of everybody else. One thing that's missing on this board and all these people making decisions? People that actually play golf. With the exception of Greg Norman, who we'll also get to later, he has been frozen out of this scenario. He has not been given a seat at the table. He was not mentioned in any of the press releases today. Was told right before the announcement was made as well. So that tells you where he stands. The rest of these guys are big money check writers, and the shit sucks for all of us. Next loser, the fans. Yes, us the fans have been given a bill of goods that ultimately we are not going to be able to cash. At the end of the day, if you're a Live fan, I already spoke about that at the intro, that's cool, man. If you don't like the way that the PGA Tour operated, you wanted something different, well, guess what? You're going back to this old thing more than likely. You are going to be back in that traditional space of golf. And yeah, there might be some little alternate events, but guess what? You already have the Waste Management Phoenix Open. If you wanted something different during the PGA Tour season, you're coming back to the normal boring ass golf. Welcome on in. But PGA Tour fans, it kind of sucks, because if you stuck with the tour, I'm not out here shilling for the PGA Tour. It is what it is. And they were going to make the decisions that they were going to make. It's always been framed as a moral standpoint from the PGA side, and that's cool. If you want to make that distinction that, hey, you were on the right side of history and that you weren't going to go against your morals, well, if you believed in Jay Monahan, you're a stupid person. I'm going to say that. He doesn't even come across as half genuine. You see him on this CNBC interview with the governor guy from the Saudi Public Investment Fund. Feels shady. It all feels very slimy and grimy. I hate it. If you believe anything that Jay Monahan says going forward, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. The man is horrible trash. He sold his players and the fans under the bridge for who knows what kind of money. For him to broker this deal without any hint of it coming out, I mean, with a handful of guys involved from the beginning, seems a little bit shady. So the losers are the PGA Tour players and PGA Tour fans who have been loyal to that side of the equation.
It's like winning.
Let's talk about the winners. Phil Mickelson. He's the guy who ultimately started this deal a couple of years ago, talking about it, and he's able to tout the big I told you so, that ultimately this is where he thought it would end up with the two leagues merging together. He has been in an all-out battle that my brother and I talked about on our live show on Sunday with Brandel Chambly, Golf Channel, and just really going at it aggressively. Do I know that he had anything, any inside knowledge about where this was going? No, I don't. But the way he was popping off at the mouth after having a measured approach up to this point seems a little bit iffy. So Phil Mickelson, number one winner, guy who may not receive his full $200 million that he signed up for with LIV, just because if he comes back to the PGA Tour, there's a lot of language in these LIV contracts that money will be clawed back. That's cool. But at the end of the day, he has dollars in his bank account that ultimately he wouldn't have seen 2 years ago without this deal coming about. So kudos to Phil. Petty Phil. Phil gets to gloat and all the things that he said were going to come to fruition at some point. Kudos to him. Way to be an asshole, bro. Second, LIV players overall that just get to benefit from financial gains of joining the league and then going back to what they probably wanted to do anyway. The travel with LIV, I think when you plotted it out, going around the world didn't really equate to playing the same amount of events that they were going to play on the PGA Tour anyway. And so, good for them. They get their money. As an individual, let's say I was an employee of the PGA Tour and I had the opportunity to go to a competitor and make more money. Kudos to me. I have never discussed the whole morality standpoint of this. This has not been my argument. My argument against LIV the entire time was that it was a bullshit league based on a bullshit premise and that had no long-term bearing. I would say that merging reinforces what I thought, which is the league could not support itself. They threatened the PGA Tour enough to make them feel some fear and pain from their inclusion into the game of golf. But could LIV stand alone? Hell no. And if you think that is true, let's go do the math on how much they lost last year. And I don't care if the Saudi Public Investment Fund has a crap ton of money to spend. At some point, losses are losses and they continue to stack up. So let's, I stay away from the moral argument. It's just a bad business model. Even though I want to stay away from the sports washing argument, let's just talk about another winner, which is the Saudi Public Investment Fund. This lends legitimacy to it as they are going to essentially pour into this new merger wherever funds are necessary.
Sir, we're talking about potentially billions of dollars being invested from the PIF, correct?
Correct.
Over what period of time?
That's an excellent question. So the first step is today. The second one is the definitive agreement. Then we are creating the board. And the governance of the whole thing is we will evaluate every proposal that will come to us at the board level. So whatever it takes, that's how much is the commitment that we are committed for.
The conversation that was posted on CNBC, there are a lot of components that really speak to the vagueness of this deal. Just seems like they came to the table and there's not a lot of things that have been ironed out in terms of detail, maybe just the structure And we'll see where things land. But at the end of the day, this lends legitimacy as they get to continue investing into the global game of golf, with the idea that they're advancing the sport somehow and eventually will be on plane with football, basketball, baseball. Please. Golf is cool. Love the game of golf, but it will never be in line with those other sports that are on the major level. It's just not that. The game is niche. And within that niche, it's pretty big. But it is not football big. It is not NBA basketball big. I'm sorry. Can't claim that. It will never be that. Not in my lifetime, in the very least. To be determined. There are a couple of aspects of this deal that to me are still to be determined. One of those is Jay Monahan, which I mentioned earlier on, that we would come back to him. At this point, this deal has not been solidified. If you ask me from an outside perspective looking in, I wonder what Jay Monahan brings to the table and how much credibility he has left in that players' room. The sounds like the meeting today with the players went incredibly rough. He was called a hypocrite, and he has to own that. And when you look at someone who is the CEO of your organization and the trust level is not there, you've sold these guys up the river, how do you come back from that at this stage? And so when I, again, turn around and look at what Jay Monahan brings to the table, other than bringing all this crap together after saying something completely different for the last 2 years, how does he bring any credibility as a CEO of all three of these? I think that is short-lived. I can honestly see a scenario where Jay Monahan gets the boot shortly after this thing comes together, or at least some more additional structure is added as his position is not solidified. This is not on paper right now. This is probably a very kind of letter of intent stage where there's not a lot of hard things in place. They don't even have a name for this new entity. I think he called it Nuco on the interview with CNBC. So if that tells you a lot and how shallow the depth of this conversation is so far, that should tell you something. Another guy that is TBD, and we'll see if he gets thrown to the wolves. However, I wouldn't be surprised if he got a big check for making this happen at the end of the day, is Greg Norman. Greg Norman was persona non grata in all of the announcements and as well as the discussion. There was no mention of Greg. And even though this may have been his brainchild for years and he's the front man for it and has been the Live CEO and elevated his position as it's gone along, he wasn't in the room making the decisions this go around. And that says a lot. When you aren't at the table and you don't know about it until the end of the deal and you're the CEO of an organization, that tells me a lot about how the Saudis feel about you. They used you and you should feel like a dirty skank. You got used, abused, and tossed to the side, my boy. Good luck to you in the future. I hope it paid. I hope it paid very well. You have pretty much burned your bridges on the global stage. You look like a clown. If you go back over the last 2 years and look at the stances and aggressive nature of Greg Norman, it was never about growing the game from his perspective, at least how he presented. You need camaraderie. You need people to build behind you when you are trying to build a global game. Greg Norman has been none of that. I'm sorry. He's just been an aggressive a-hole coming directly at PGA Tour pros, the PGA Tour itself, which fair game on the PGA Tour. His approach has not been about a collaborative feeling. And so he gets his just desserts. TBD on where it goes with Greg Norman. And the last TBD, which I think is honestly more important, is the global growth of the game. As a golfer, somebody who enjoys the game of golf, whether pros exist or not, I'm going to play the game of golf. Does that limit how many courses are available because of popularity, etc.? Yes, of course, professional ranks tend to grow any sport, but I am going to play the game whether they exist or not. Will this turn down my viewership? I don't know. I have this channel. We talk about golf here. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent, dysfunctional. We talk about it. And so will that change? No. But could I exist without it? Hell yeah. And that's the thing about golfers. You hanging with your buddies, whether it's your weekend foursome, your golf league, etc. You just playing by yourself after work early in the morning. it's just because you love the essence of the game of golf. And that will still remain the same even if the pro game does or does not exist. However, the top line of golf could be affected by this decision. In the immediate, I think people are going to be kind of spoiled by this. It feels ugly. It feels gross. It feels like I went into the refrigerator this morning and grabbed some milk that I thought was fresh, and you put it in your mouth and it was sour. It gone bad. And that's what this decision feels like. I don't even care what side you're on in this discussion. It feels a little bit icky to me. Tell me, do you have any other winners, losers, or things that you think are still left to be determined? I think there are a lot of things that are still left to be determined overall because the deal is so new and fresh and there's not a lot of detail. And outside of the business entity structure and them getting into that, there's not a lot has been revealed, and we will find out more. We'll talk more about it on my Sunday live, the Bearded Bros Golf Show. Hit that subscribe button. Join us for that. Hit that notification bell so you know when we're going live, usually 7 p.m. Central. Tell me what you think. Where are you at with this decision? Does it feel gross to you? I have a poll going as well about this subject. Go vote in that. I really want to hear what the community has to say. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.